places there and do your distancing, and we are going to begin this morning. I appreciate you coming to be a part of our service today. And y'all must have been very bad this week because we decided the piano was just kind of not working, so we were going to do acapella. And then Kurt called this morning, and he has injured himself, and he's not able to be here. So all you got left is me. So I don't know what you have done this week, but if you'll repent and turn back, then God will give you some relief from just a Danny only morning. But we're going to begin. We're going to do just the first verse since we are limited in our ability here. We're just going to do some a cappella singing, and I want you to sing along. And if you want to, or if you want to stand outside your car and sing, that'll be okay. And I think we'll still be within the safety parameters. But we're going to begin with just that little chorus of "I love you, Lord, and I lift my voice, worship you, my soul rejoice. Take joy, my King, in what you hear. May it be a sweet, sweet sound in your ear." So sing with me. I love you, Lord, and I lift my voice to worship you. Oh, my soul, rejoice. Take joy, my King, in what you hear. May it be a sweet, sweet sound in your ear. Now, the songs I've chosen goes along with the theme of the message I want to present in a little bit, and it is really kind of a part two of last week. And I've got an interesting story that I want to share with you in light of that. But each of these songs are reflective of the love that the Father has for us and the love that we are to have for Him. Or it's in that context that we live our lives. Or if we don't have that context, then it is my premise that we really don't know what this life is all about in the first place. But one of the great old hymns that all of us know that is the culmination of the love of God shown to us, and that is the sacrifice of Christ upon the cross and the victory that we have in Him. So we'll do the first verse of Victory in Jesus. I heard an old story. I heard an old story, how a Savior came from glory, how He gave His life on Calvary to save a wretch like me. I heard about His groaning, of His precious blood's atoning. Then I repented of my sin and won the victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with His redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew Him, and all my love is due Him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. And before I present the message, let's share together in what I hope is our prayer in the message that God has for us, and that is sanctuary. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Lord, I do pray that you will prepare us to be ready and able and capable and willing for you to dwell in us. Lord, we know that it is a reality that once we turn our eyes in faith toward you, that you enter in, that you become part of us and we in you. But Lord, I pray that this morning you would break down any walls, any barriers that we may have allowed to grow up between us, and that you would renew our love for you, and that you would reveal your love for us. In Jesus' name, amen. I'm going to be using this morning a couple of passages, one out of the New Testament. If you want to turn there, you'll find it in Matthew and 24. And the second is a story out of the Old Testament. Along with the theme of Mother's Day, last week I presented a message on the love that we have for one another and the love that God has for us. And I ended with kind of a plea for a prayer for you, that you would ask God to bring someone into your life this past week in which you could share the love of Christ. And, I did, honestly, just in total transparency, I did pray that prayer, but I'm not sure of the earnestness, and I didn't really repeat it, and was not even in my thought and in my mind until the end of the week, when I received an unusual message via the text message on the phone, and it was from someone that I had not seen since I was probably 14 years old. Now, that was a long time ago, And when I got it, it was kind of surreal, and I thought, what on earth is this? And he asked if I was the Danny Decker from Elk Lick. And that's when I knew, okay, this is valid. Who on earth would know what on earth Elk Lick is, much less where Elk Lick is, and would refer to such an obscure and long ago passage in my life. So I sent him a message back, said, yes, this is the right Danny Decker. And he told me his name, and I very vaguely remembered him. But then I mentioned him to Mom, and Mom said, oh, yeah, who was your buddy? And just a short version of it was yesterday, I did, not yesterday, before, Friday evening, I did call him, and not knowing a thing in the world about it, but as he shared his story, and it was really amazing how similar it paralleled my story, how that after he left the West Virginia area, Elk Lick, had some fallout, some trouble with the law, and some involvement in drugs. But Christ pursued him, and Christ brought him to himself, and he was in his early 20s. And from there, he felt the call of Christ, went into the ministry. And, it's been a bumpy road for him, and still is. But it was something to be able to see someone from so long ago that I'd never thought of in decades, and yet Christ again brings them back. Our paths cross, we share our faith, and over the phone we were able to just pray together. So I thought that was unique, that was unusual, how that God did answer that prayer to allow us to share his love with someone else. And that needs to be an ongoing thing in our lives, of us receiving the love of God, and then in turn pouring out that love on those around us. But I want to begin this morning with a unusual story. If it were presented in our culture today, it would be presented as a tragic love story. It's between a woman named Cozbi, Cozbi, and a man named Zimri, Zimri. Cozbi was a Midianite lady. Zimri was a Jewish and Israelite man. And their paths crossed, and of course they were cross-culture. Almost a Romeo and Juliet type story, or how many stories, love stories have been told, books written, movies made about star-crossed loves. people that just really don't belong together, but they want to be together nonetheless. And their story ends in tragedy. A cruel zealot takes both their lives. His name was Phineas. If Phineas were alive today, he would be charged probably with a hate crime. Saying, oh, how cruel, how unfair, how unjust that he took these two lovers' lives so quickly and cut them off so shortly. And that is how man would present it, because that is how man would view love. What is a worldly love? I mean, what is love at all? Have you ever read the definition of love? Can you define love? You know, and I won't rehash last week looking at the biblical definition of the three types of love. Got in big trouble with my family there. They really raked me over the coals at lunch. I don't know if everyone else did. And Abigail's giving me the cut sign. Don't say anything else. Don't dig the hole any deeper. So I will stop there. But I would challenge each of you to ask yourself, what is love? What is love to you? What is love in our culture? Well, in our culture, it means many things. But it really comes down to, well, it is something or someone that you really want, you have an affection for, that it brings fulfillment to your life, makes you happy, makes you more of a man, or makes you more of a woman, makes you feel alive, makes you feel fulfilled. It is that brings context to life. And indeed, that is a type of love, and it's very real. But that type of love, even a love between a husband and wife, I mean, that is biblical. That is God ordained. That is by His design. We hold it and we possess it. And yet, do we keep it? Does it remain the same? The love of this world is always shifting. It is always changing. It is never constant. It is something that we hold and cherish. And then as we hold it and cherish it, without even knowing it, begins to shift and change. And we don't know whether to go back and to move forward, or whether just to cut it off and move on, or to try to just hold on to something that you don't recognize anymore. Such is the love of man. We change and we are fickle. And some days we don't feel love and can't even say why. Some days we are angry at those that we love and don't even know why. And some days we don't know whether to blame ourselves or to blame them, but we're not happy in the relationship where we are. You know, I want to go back to the story, and you can read it. It's a very harsh story. It's a very crude story in Numbers in chapter 25, the story of Cosby and Zimri that I mentioned before. Well, you see, you know Israel. God had led them out of Egypt. They were a slave nation. They were the descendants of Abraham. And God, with a mighty hand, transformed them from a slave people to a free people. Transformed them from a people with a bondage about their neck to a people that He said, follow me. And then God came down on that great day on the mountain of Sinai with thunderings and fire and clouds, and He spoke to them and gave them His law and said, thus shall you live. These are the commandments whereby you are to dictate your life. And one of those commandments was, you are to love me. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. And Jesus added to that, and love your neighbor as yourself. So God gave them a relationship. He gave them His love, and then He gave them the context wherewith to live out that love. And Israel went about and went on their journeys, on their way to the promised land, wandering through the wilderness. and interacting with the different cultures around them. Thus enters in the story of Cozbi, the Midianite. For you see, the Midianites were a well-established people, and Cozbi came from a leader among the Midianite people. Her father was one of the tribal leaders of the Midianites. And they worshiped their own gods. And they had their rituals. And in that worship, they would have their feasts and they would have their love fests. And they had integrated in their own physical desires and called it worship. And Israel began to see this. And Israel began to be drawn into it. And Israel began to participate in it. And God came down and spoke to Moses and said, this must not, this cannot go on. For you see, God was preserving that people, for he had a work for them to do. He had to intervene at this time to continue his plan for Israel and thus for the Christ coming and for you and I. You see, so much hung in the balance. Cozbi and Zimri didn't see this. They didn't know this. They were just two people doing what they wanted to do. There was a physical attraction. And therefore, they said, okay, why should we withhold ourselves from what we desire? And at the very time that Moses was bringing judgment down on Israel, Zimri comes into the camp with Cozbi. They go into his tent. Phinehas, a priest of Israel, sees this. He takes up a spear, he goes into the tent, and he pierces them both through, and thus they die. And not only they, but 24,000 others on that day, through the plague that God brought down upon them, lost their life. The question that I would ask is, was what Cozbi and Zimri doing, was it love? The world would tell us yes, would it not? I mean, our media baptizes us in, oh yes, that is love. It's presented in a multitude of ways as love. Indeed, at its basis level, if you want to bring love down to an appetite fulfilled, I guess you could call it love. But in the biblical sense, it was not love. You know, the premise that I have, and if you turn to Matthew 24, I'm going to put it into context there. You know, the love of mankind, it is fickle, it is temporary, it is always shifting, it is always changing. But the love of God is eternal. It is permanent. It is substance. You know, the purest love that we can have is going to grow into something more. Christ himself said in heaven, there is neither marriage nor giving in marriage. That doesn't mean that he takes away from us. It means he's going to replace it with something he has not yet revealed, something deeper, something more. He said to the children, forsake father and mother and follow me. He says to the parents, forsake one another and follow me. He is not saying deny your love. He is saying let it grow deeper. Let it become something real. Let it have a context. Let it have a purpose. And because so many emotions that we call love, so many affections, so many feelings that the world presents and calls it love, is not really biblical love. To keep love alive, to possess real love, we have to have a context and we have to understand the source of love. You know, in Matthew 24, this is an unusual passage to use in a message on love. Because if you are familiar with that passage, it is Christ describing the end of days. Christ had passed by the temple. The disciples had commented on what a magnificent building it was. And Jesus told the disciples, you see it, but it is going to be destroyed. And that was fulfilled some 40 years after the ascension of Christ into heaven. When the Romans came and sacked Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, he was said to them, not one stone be left upon another. And they were saying, okay, when's this going to be? What tells us about the end of days? How's it going to look? And Jesus was teaching them, and in verse 24, chapter 24, verse 9, says, they shall deliver you. The wind is interfering with my versions here. They shall deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you. And ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall arise, and shall deceive many. The verse 12 is the key verse that I want us to hone in on here. I want to read it from both the King James, the New American Standard, and the New International. Verse 12 says, in King James says, because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. The New American Standard says, because lawlessness is increased, most people's love will grow cold. And verse 12 says, because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. Regardless of which version you use, or which wording, the principle, the truth is still there and remains. There is an equation between wickedness, lawlessness, and the growing cold of love. We see this in our day. We see this in our culture. What does the world present? Love is freedom. Revolution of the 60s that grew into the 70s. How many times did they put together the words free and love, free love? Throw off the shackles. Indeed, they even said, okay, the old family model, we don't need this anymore. That's too restrictive. What we call love, they call hate. Because if we love someone, are we going to tell them the truth? If we love someone, are we going to present Christ for who he is? I mean, because what is the biblical message? We must come to God, or be eternally condemned. Now the world hears that and says, how dare you? Who are you? What on earth do you mean? You can't say that. I will find my way to God. I will find my path to God. My way to God is as good as your way to God. My way of love is just as good as your way of love. My way of seeing things is just as good as your way of seeing things. And we see our world, our society, our country at each other's throats, divided on so many levels. For what reason? Because we are looking at it through two different lenses. And if there is no God, and if there is no revelation, and if the Bible is not here and the Bible is not true, then their argument is accurate. All we have left is my opinion, your opinion, and we just have to battle it out and see who's going to prevail. If love comes from us, then love can be whatever you want it to be. If I am going to define love for me, I will tell you what love is. This is what love is to me, and that is the message of the world. That's what you're supposed to do. Oh, if you ever find what love is, then happy are you, fulfilled are you. Eureka, you found it. No, that is the deceit of the enemy, to even think that you could know what love is without the help of God, without the aid of God. Back to the original story of Zimri and Cosby. What happened to Zimri? It's easy. It is simple. He simply chose to ignore what God had said. He simply chose to forget God. When an attractive alternative that he looked at, and in his mind, he thought, I desire this. I want this. Cosby is appealing to me. I think I may love her. And he forgot. You shall have no other gods before me. He forgot. You shall not commit adultery. He forgot. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. He forgot. You shall not covet your neighbor's substance, your neighbor's houses, your neighbor's wife. He forgot who God was. So he went pursuing his own version of love. And yet he found death. Can I love without God? That's a hard question to answer, is it not? At a level, you can't. At a level, there are some very attractive substitutes. But I stand by my premise that to truly know love, you must know God. I had not intended to go there, but I'm going to use just a little snippet out of 1 Corinthians 13, that quintessential passage on the characteristics of love. And if I go there, we'll be here far too long. But as Paul lists those various characteristics of what love looks like, and I would encourage you to revisit and look at that and study it regularly. It is kind, it is forgiving, it does not remember wrong. But then he ends it with an amazing statement. Because he says, if I give my body, if I give my life and have not love, it is nothing. Can we really lay down our life and account for nothing? Absolutely. See, because if I do it in my own vanity, if I do it for my own cause, if I do it to fulfill what I think is right, then why am I dying? For my own selfish vanity, my own selfish pride. You may remember the bomber of, I should forget what year it was, the Oklahoma City bomber, Timothy McVeigh, and blew up the federal building in Oklahoma City. Took, I think, 154 lives, men, women, and children. He did it because he believed in a cause. He was going to throw off tyranny. He was going to point out the fallacies of our oppressive government. They caught him. They tried him. They convicted him and sentenced him to death. And this was not a verbatim quote, but his response was, I do not fear. I do not regret. I do not know what lies beyond death, but whatever it is, I will adapt and I will overcome. See, he was laying down his life for what he believed in, and it was for nothing besides his own prideful vanity. That's a scary thought, isn't it? That we can believe in something so strongly we're willing to die for it, and yet be wrong. So what is the hope? What is the remedy? It is simple. You rely on him who is love. You put your love into context. You submit your love to God's law. You say to God, I want to love, but I want to love under your umbrella. I want to love seeing the world as you see it. I want to love knowing who I am in you. I want to love by doing what you want me to do. Because when you do so, then you will love. And you will love with a context. And you will love with a certainty. And you will love with a purpose. There's not a one of you that has not been hurt by love at some level. You know, I see over here in Emery and Pete, I hope you don't mind, I'll use you for an illustration. Both of them have lost wives that they loved. They still do. Love hurts. Some have been in a relationship that did not go as they wanted it to, did not go as they thought it would. Because we're flawed and we're hurting. Because we love him perfectly. Love is costly. Love can be hard. But it's the only thing that gives this life its real meaning, its real purpose. I challenge each of you, wherever you are, whatever stage of life, whatever circumstance in which you find yourself, whether you are a young person dreaming of love, that is fine. That is right. That is natural. But do not claim it as your own. Keep it submitted to what God has said. Put it in context. Before you enter into any serious relationship, you run to him and say, Lord, your will be done. Lord, show me the way in this. Or whether you are hurting, God can use your hurt to heal others. Let it be in context of who he is. When Christ laid down his life as the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate act of love, he was abandoned by everyone. And yet his love was true. And because his love was true, all those disciples, save Judas, that abandoned him, came back to him. That love that was hurting, that love that was confusing, that love that they didn't know what to do with. It's not working out. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. I'm running. I'm hiding. God brought them to a place where they could mimic the love wherewith they were loved. And that is my heart's cry for me, for you, for all of us. From our homes, to our community, to our workplaces, to those that God may bring across our path that we have no idea that it's coming. May we engage it with a heart of love. We see the vitriol of our day, and it worries me. People turning against one another. Left, right, conservative, liberal, call it the label of whatever you will. May I implore you as a child of God, please rise above that. And don't say that in any sanctimonious, holier than thou way. I'm saying that you will be the glue that will hold the world together when it is coming apart. If you know how to love when you are being hated. If you know how to love when you are being misunderstood. If you know how to love when you know this isn't going to be returned, you have found the love of God. And you have found a safety that will only be had in Him. Let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you for loving us. And Lord, I've stood here and I presented a message. That's the easy part. Now let me go out and live this message to the best of my ability. Bring across my path those that I can show your love. Help me to live this love within the confines of my own home. Let it transform me into who you would desire me to be. And us as a church family, pour out your love on us, that we can in turn share that love with those around us. In Jesus' name, amen. I'd like to dismiss this morning with the simple chorus of turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. God bless y'all. Thank you so much. Hope you have a wonderful, blessed week. Oh, I forgot to plug just a couple of announcements. Peggy had put out a bring disinfectants in. I think we are okay on everything, but if you do have, I mean, because it's just in short supply right now, if you find a source for, it's a spray disinfectant. Okay, we have enough hand sanitizer, but if you find a source for the wipes or the spray disinfectant, that's just in kind of limited supply. So if you can get it, we'll reimburse you. If you let us know, we'll go get it. But we appreciate you. The disinfectant scouts. So if you can find some out there, let us know. And our plan right now is to, not next week, but the following week on May 31st, to begin again in-house meeting in the sanctuary again. We'll be sending out a letter giving perspective and the guidelines that we're going to be following. But right now we'll be doing only the 11 o'clock service, at least for a few weeks, as we transition back in to worshiping together corporately inside. So, but that is the plan is right now, May 31st at 11 o'clock. So plan to be there. Next week, we'll do this again, weather permitting. But God bless y'all. Thanks again. Enjoy this beautiful day. And thank the Lord for the cloud cover. That really was a lifesaver.